Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all the spring games that are going on tomorrow, but now let's get to some Cinderella candidates for 2024. There are so many people that are been watching for that next TCU, that team that kind of blows up the party, and with the 12-team playoff, there is more ability for those teams to, at the very least, get into the dance. So I wanted to break down some of the teams that I'm watching in particular. I have a team per conference here that I want to get to, and let's start in the Big 12 with Texas Tech. This is a team that I am very, very interested in this year. I think their offense is really, really talented when you look at it at face value at the very least. Taj Brooks is one of the best running backs in the entire country. Micah Hudson is a freshman coming in at wide receiver. He was the only five-star that was signed across the entirety of the Big 12 last cycle. Baron Morton is getting more and more comfortable in that offense. You added Josh Kelly from Washington State at wide receiver, along with Caleb Douglas from Florida, two guys that have big-time ceilings and will definitely help them reach the ability that this team has. So that offensive side of the ball has dudes all over the place. So as long as there's not injuries or anything big that happens to this team, I think they're going to produce on the offensive side of the ball. Now, the defense is a little bit sketchier. You know, there are some holes in that defense. Definitely returning some guys that will be big-time players for them, but especially on that back end of that defense, they lose guys like Tyler Owens and Dadrian Taylor Damerson that were absolutely huge for them, and losing them is big time. So you will need definitely young guys to step up in those places, but the ability to make that happen, I think, is very much on the table. You have tons of very good staffers there at Texas Tech, and the Big 12 is pretty wide open, especially with the schedule that Texas Tech has. They avoid Kansas State and Utah. That is absolutely huge. They do have a trip to Arizona, but later in the season, so maybe you can work out some of the kinks on that back end or get that offense up to its full ability by that time and give Arizona a little run for their money. Definitely a team that people aren't necessarily looking at that right now, but a huge reason that I'm watching them very closely going into this year is Joey McGuire. I think their head coach is someone that they absolutely nailed. He just feels like Lubbock, Texas to me. He's someone that really gives off that Texas Tech vibe and is so good at what he does, which is just being an elite motivator. He's someone that everyone wants to go play for. He's someone that everyone loves to play for, and I think that's a huge thing when you talk about this transfer portal era and all of the things going on that are kind of out of the control of the coach. One of the things that isn't is just being someone that is fired up to come to work every day, that, puts their best foot forward for their kids every single day. And that's something that he does at an insane clip. So Joey McGuire is someone that I have full faith in. I think he could lead them to a playoff berth. Maybe it's not this year, but this is a team that's capable of a lot of different things if you just give them, a little bit of ability. Baron Morton plays a little bit above what his baseball card might say, or Micah Hudson bursts onto the scene, or Josh Kelly hits big as a transfer. Any of these things happen, and Texas Tech could be a team that really blows up the Big 12. So definitely watching them there. But let's move on to the ACC and let's talk about Virginia Tech, a team that is so interesting to me because Kyron Drones is their quarterback, frankly. He is a guy that is such a big deal as you go through the ACC because there are very few games that they're going to play where they will not have the quarterback advantage. And that's something that is absolutely huge in college football as you go throughout. And it's something that cannot be taken for granted, especially in a conference like the ACC that is totally wide open and tons of new quarterbacks are coming in. Someone like Kyron Drones, who has been there for a while and has been productive in that offense, is a huge deal to have at the helm. Also, this team returns 22 starters from a year ago. Now, that does include the kicker and the punter, so they are losing two guys from the defensive side of the ball. But overall, returning everyone from the offensive side of the ball, returning your kicker and your punter is huge because it means you can probably convert drives into points very consistently, which is the ultimate goal, right? If you can keep putting points on the board consistently when you go down the field, you're going to have a lot of success. And then Brent Pry going into his third year as the Hokies head coach, someone that has improved the roster considerably since he's gotten there, and I will be very interested to see what he can do. I don't think this team will be much of a razzle-dazzle type team week in, week out. They won't put up like 70 points or anything crazy, But I do think you'll look up in week 5, they'll be undefeated walking into Coral Gables with a chance to take the ACC by storm by beating Miami. If they win that game, they have another big game against Clemson, but they get them at home. So there's this ability where if you can walk out of week 5 having beat Miami and being 5-0 in the ACC, the chances for this team are sky high. So they could very well be the Louisville of this team, a steady defense that doesn't give teams a lot of chances to, beat them. And then the offense just kind of relies on that quarterback play that Kyron Drones can provide and ride that to possibly the top of the ACC. So it'd be really interesting to watch if they can pull that off. But let's move on down to the SEC here and talk about a team that we've talked about a little bit on here in the Kentucky Wildcats, a team that I feel like everyone is watching. This one was a little bit easier than the rest of them. They do return 17 starters, brought in portal guys like Brock Vandegrift, Jamori Macklin, Chip Trainum on the offensive side of the ball, returned big-time players on the defensive side of the ball like Deone Walker, J.J. Weaver, Maxwell Harrison, brought in a guy like Jamon Dumas-Johnson from UGA at linebacker. So they've done remarkable things. They've had about as good of an offseason thus far as pretty much anyone. I think this might be the most talented team that Mark Stoops has had, and he has done a lot with a lot less in the past. So definitely a team that I'm watching very closely. Brock Vandegrift has walked in the door and taken this thing by the horns, and it's been really, really cool to see. He's someone that, the sky is the limit for his talent ability, but coming into a new situation and being the leader that he had to be was always going to be something that was going to be a little bit tough, but it seems like he is taking that in stride and has been no problem for him. So the one real issue here is the schedule is not forgiving at all. You do have UGA at home, at Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Texas, and Louisville on the schedule. So it's not necessarily going to be an easy road for them to get there, but let's just say they catch lightning in the bottle on September 14th and Brock Vandegrift can beat his former team in UGA. Things get really interesting really quickly. I think that Ole Miss game, that Tennessee game becomes a little bit more tight. And then if you win one or both of those games, that Texas game becomes a classic all of a sudden very quickly. So we'll be watching that very, very closely. Obviously a terribly hard schedule, but when you're in the SEC, that's kind of the game you play. I'll be really interested to see what this team can be. I think their ceiling is as high as it's been in quite some time around Lexington. So I think they're capable of doing incredible things as long as Brock Vandegrift can hit the remarkable ceiling that he has. But let's move on to the Big Ten here, and let's talk about Wisconsin. Luke Fickell is in year 2. This team is starting to become his team, which is a huge piece of what he can do. And when it becomes his team, usually at his former stops, they start winning some games. So definitely something to watch as we go into this season. They are losing Braylon Allen, which is a huge loss at running back, but they have Ches Malusi. They got a transfer from OU and Tawee Walker. So I think that's a very good duo that will definitely be able to pick up the slack there. I think bringing in Tyler Van Dyke was actually one of the more overlooked moves of the entire offseason. I think he did not have a good year last year. There's no two ways about that, but plenty of good football left in this kid, and I think a change of scenery could be exactly what he needs, and be very excited for this kid when he moves forward. I think another piece of this is I feel like they got the quarterback of the defense in the portal. I think they got Tackett Curtis from USC, and he is going to be a huge piece of that defense. Mike Tressel, the son of Jim Tressel, is someone that has done a great job with the defenses under Luke Fickell for quite some time, was at Cincinnati with him before moving over to Wisconsin, and having someone like that on the inside of your defense like Tackett Curtis could be absolutely huge. So very excited for him in particular. And then I think if you can run the ball and Tyler Van Dyke is accurate, things will get very interesting very fast. They do have Bama on the schedule, but no Michigan or Ohio State. They have Oregon and Penn State instead, which is not necessarily ideal, but they can probably handle it, I think. Luke Fickell is one of those guys that makes things happen when you are not looking. So I'm very interested to see what he can do this year with a Wisconsin team that looks really, really impressive from where I'm standing. And then finally, a group of 5 team here, and I want to go to Texas State. They did a great job in the portal, picking up a ton of big-time kids. A ton of group of 5 teams did. We had Tulane pick up some kids. Boise State did a great job in the portal, so definitely something that the group of 5 teams are benefiting from quite a bit. But Texas State might have done it better than anyone else. They got Jordan McLeod, the player of the year in the Sun Belt last year from JMU. He transferred in conference, so now he is GJ Kenny's guy and the Bobcats guy at quarterback. So it'll be very interesting to watch him. I think Tunamis Adiele from a Texas A&M transfer at D-line is an absolute difference maker. And he's someone that could be huge for them in the conference race and then possibly in the playoff race as they get deeper. I think the winner of the Sun Belt is right in the thick of things for that auto bid for the group of 5 teams. Pretty much them and the AAC, I think, would be the team or the conferences that are vying for that position, but I'd lean Sun Belt for the most part. I think Texas State has a remarkably high ceiling. I think Jordan McLeod is capable of catching lightning in a bottle and kind of doing something that no one expects, which is a group of 5 team possibly even winning a playoff game. So having someone like that definitely does open things up. Arizona State is a game on their schedule early in the season that if they win that and end up winning the Sun Belt, that could be the game that ends up putting them into the playoff. We'll be very interested to see what this team can pull off, and so many teams to watch. You know, there's Cinderella candidates all over the country, but those are just a couple that I pulled out of those conferences. And then it'll be really interesting to see what they can pull off this year. I think all these teams are very talented, but a couple things definitely have to break their way. But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. We will be back to normal, back to live on Monday, so no worries there. Your support does mean a lot to us. Please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It makes a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for more content and updates. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys Monday.